These little guys that you pour tea over are called teapets. And these, well, you know what this is. You probably have a lot of them. But can our vinyl friends double as teapets? Now, after years of testing teapots and other teaware, I don't often use teapets, but it's because I don't use a wet setup. And if you don't know what either of those are, don't worry, we'll get to it later in the video. And we'll do a couple tests to see if funkos can hold up to 1, the heat, and 2, the stains of pouring hot tea water over repeatedly. And also geeking out a little bit on choosing the right funko, which is not what you think. First off, we should probably cover what is a teapet. So it's a little character or token that you're gonna put on your tea table or your tea tray and pour your tea over it. Practically, you can do this for either an aged tea or a pressed tea or both. The idea being to pour that first steep over the teapet because the tea hasn't opened up yet, both literally and in taste. Or if you don't use a strainer like me, you'll get little sediment or debris in the bottom of your cup or pitcher. In that case, leave just a little bit of tea in the bottom, swish that shrapnel around, and then you can pour that over your teapot as well. Oh, and these little guys are good luck in China. I don't know if that would carry over to the funkos exactly. Now, as I said, I don't normally use teapets. And before we get into why, I need to speak to the 2 cults of teapet followers. Cults feels too strong. Camps, groups of people. Basically, the argument here is saying that teapets are pointless. But yeah, nothing means anything unless we value it. Case in point, football. So take a breath. And to those of you who tensed up when I said that I don't use teapets, it's not because I don't like them, it's because I normally use a dry setup, where largely you're keeping the tea space dry, as opposed to a wet setup. So for the dry setup, you're pouring directly onto a table or a mat or a tea towel, and you don't have a tea tray or something else that has drainage to it. So pouring over the teapot wouldn't really make sense. Instead of a teapot for a wet setup with a dry setup, you typically just have like a wastewater bowl. I know, boring. But if we do want to actually use our teapots, then we need to consider a wet setup. The main difference is literally just swapping out that towel or your tea mat for a tea tray. And now we can use the drainage for spills and spillovers. You're smart, you get it. But what about funkos? And my first reaction when I saw this comment was definitely a bit dramatic, but this actually came from sourcing larger teapots. Well, accidentally larger. We were looking for a Wukong teapot, the Monkey King. And this idea with the larger teapots and me questioning them comes back to an idea that I talk about with teaware all the time. Was it intentional? Some examples. Sculptural matchable doubles as a piece of art. Intentional. High handle, less wrist strain. Intentional. A side handle pot that you can't grab with your whole hand, you need a specific thumb grip. Intentional. These intentional choices lean into the art of functional pottery. It's why it's varied but also still interesting, which I talked a little bit too much about in this last video if you want to go check it out. So the same intentionality applies to teapots. The XXL Wukong teapots were not intentional. Like bigger than your Gongfu teapot. Now you could argue that the Wukong ones were meant to be bigger. You definitely could argue that point. But when we went to Yixing, you would go into some studios and they would have hundreds of teapots. And most of them, they would have them in different sizes. But how does that apply to you if you want to go with a funko? Well, most people who are drinking Gongfu tea in the West are either drinking by themselves or with a small group, not with a massive tea table that's like half of a tree inside of a tea house. For those types of spaces, sure, a larger teapot makes sense. But for our case, not so much. And actually, ironically enough, the Wukong teapots that we were looking for are actually very comparable size to this Wukong Funko. Too big to fit on a tea tray for most people. But I remembered when I was out looking at Funko Pops with my daughter, I don't know, a few months back, seeing the Biddy Pops. And I thought they might be perfect. And then I went and got some and they were like so perfect. Like, I really don't know how I didn't think about it before. I wasn't sure if they came out of the little boxes. They do. I wasn't sure if they would stand up. They do, and they have a stand attached. And then when I saw the stand, I thought, well, I could paint the base, and I flipped it upside down, and there's a screw in it. You can unscrew the base, so you don't have to worry about getting paint everywhere. Love it. Your Honor, the defense rests its case. I know there's probably people out there who are a bit less utilitarian than me, but I want my teapot for a functional purpose. I just want to pour the rinsed tea in the shrapnel. So that small size, for me, matters. So for the temperature, I did 2 separate tests to stress test Stress test the Funkos. And honestly, I was pretty surprised. I don't know if I should be. Like maybe this is obvious, but it wasn't to me. The first test was just pouring boiling water over the Funko 200 times. Originally, I was thinking I was just gonna do it 100 times, but it was pretty seamless and it didn't look like there was any change after the first 100, so I wanted to keep going. Oh, except the drainage tube, the coaster, the tray, and the Funko got so hot. Like I never thought I would almost burn myself on a coaster, like on a cushion. Yeah, it was weird. So if you're using the Funko as your only tea pet, is 200 times enough for the whole life of it? No, probably not. But it didn't melt, droop, or have like any runoff at all, like zero. The only thing that I could see is it looked like there wasn't hair in the back, like Luke was going through like a midlife crisis. Probably should try Keeps. You can see just a little bit of detail loss and the color of Luke's skin underneath where his hair was on this one. So after hundreds of uses, yes, it will break down a little, but honestly, it's pretty impressive. Then for the second test, I just submerged Vader for about half an hour because, you know, he hasn't gone through enough already. I guess unsurprisingly after the first test, nothing really happened. He was fine. But the only other thing besides the size, the temperature, and of course, how cute they are, is what about when the tea stains them? Honestly, if you're thinking that, you just need to drink more tea. No, in all seriousness though, in the tea space, patinaing is often seen as a very good thing. There's countless examples. Unglazed pots changing the density, wood-fired wares getting all sorts of rainbow colors from the tea oils, crackling, which in pretty much the rest of the whole pottery scene, crackling is seen as a negative thing, but it's the main feature and one of the most famous glazes from like the height of Chinese pottery development ever. In the Song Dynasty, the Ru glaze or Ru Yao, these are all things that are sought after in the tea world. I would imagine it's for the same reason as like jade. One way to get that smoothness is have water run over the jade for hundreds and thousands of years to smooth it. Another way is you physically rubbing the jade, and the oils from your hands and your fingers and fingerprints can also help to smooth it out. It's some kind of like flex. It's like showing off your scars or something like that. I'm kind of reaching at this point, but trust me, in the tea world, things staining is normally seen as a good thing. So Funkos as tea pets, yeah, I'm in. But it's time for me to go drink more tea.